Yo, gentlemen, you probably saw these videos where people try to make games using AI. And yes, sometimes the result looks interesting, sometimes it looks sad, but it made me want to try to make an AI game of my own using ChatGPT and see how good AI is at the moment, especially now that it got all these updates and became smarter. And before I start, I want to clear something out. I'll be using the Godot game engine and do all the coding, while GPT Mastermind will come up with the game concept, visuals, music, basically all the creative work. If you just want to see how a fully ChatGPT generated game looks like, here it is. It's actually quite impressive. Firstly, I asked GPT to write a game design document. It came up with a bunch of stuff, but that doesn't really matter, cause as development goes, our AI friend will forget most of it. So let's just focus on the game overview. The game is called Fragmented Realm, and it's a top-down pixel art action adventure that takes 3 hours to beat. 3 hours! Guys, I'm sorry, I don't want to make a 3-hour AI game. Instead, let's do a 10-minute demo. Then I asked about the development plan. First, we start with the gameplay prototype, then we make a level, and then we test and refine. Sounds good. Then ChatGPT somehow gaslighted itself into opening the game engine and starting to make a prototype, and then finally it told me to make a player script. I found some placeholder sprites, built simple level, and then I've made a basic player script with movement, simple attacks, and added this guy that does nothing. Now it's time to add an actual enemy instead of this placeholder. ChatGPT came up with a corrupted sentry enemy and generated a 32x32 sprite. And I'll just say it was not a 32x32 sprite, so I had to resize it a little. Actually, seeing this sprite made me realize that I have to change placeholders to AI-generated sprites as soon as possible. So ChatGPT generated this sprite for the player, which looks pretty nice, and this tileset for the level. And the thing is, they don't really look like sprites for a top-down game. They look like they were made for a side-scroller. So I decided that from now on, this game will be a side-scroller. It seemed like the correct choice. Oh yeah, did you see the lack of transparent background on these sprites? We'll get to it later, but just keep it in mind. I changed the sprites, built a little room, and started working on this newly added enemy. It has a pretty simple behavior. It patrols some area, and when it sees the player, it uses a laser attack. After a few adjustments, I had a pretty nice laser with this delayed aiming. Now I can finally make the first level. Or can I? At the time I was developing this game, OpenAI updated their image generator, and I thought it would be nice to test it out. So I asked GPT to generate a new tile set, and this one actually looks nice. It looks nice, but it's not a tile set, it's a pixel art image, so I had to spend an hour trying to fit parts of this image in a tile set grid. I spent some time, but I must say the tile set I ended up with actually looks pretty cool. Then I asked what the first level should look like. The first level is a tutorial, so it just introduces the player to the basics of the game. ChatGPT even generated a rough sketch for this level, and yeah, it's actually rough. For this level I also needed some hazards, traps, so GPT gave me this image to work with. And remember when I told you about the lack of transparent backgrounds on these images? Well, for every sprite that ChatGPT generates, I have to spend a solid 20-30 minutes to delete this background manually to get a working image. And no, you can't just upload it to RemoveBG or other website to get your transparent background, because even if it looks like this image has a solid black background, actually it's like a billion different tones of black, which makes it impossible for this website to detect the background and remove it. And it's not the last time I'll mention it. Anyway, I've added 3 types of traps: swinging blades, scythe, whatever it is, spikes, and this ceiling spike trap. Then ChatGPT sent me an email telling that adding environmental storytelling elements will make the levels feel more immersive and mysterious. It sent me another tile set. I spent another half an hour deleting the background, and now I finally was able to make a simple level, but it doesn't work as a tutorial yet. So ChatGPT generated these sprites for player controls and gave me some texts to use for a tutorial. And I've just put some text labels with Minecraft font on this level. I also added a collectible, but instead of making it some lore item, I just decided to go for random images. For example, on the first level you get to collect the GPT icon. Then I made one more level using all the stuff I had, and when it came to making the third level, ChatGPT said that it's time to add a new enemy, the Dagger Crawler, and gave me this image. After some background removal, we have this nice looking sprite, but we still need some animations. So I thought it would be fun to challenge this new image generator and ask GPT to try to animate this sprite. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I separated the hand from the main sprite and rotated it to make it look like an attack animation. Then I made this enemy move by dashing, but it still looked pretty sad, so I found this tutorial on adding blur shader, followed it step by step and used it to make this little animation. It looks silly on its own, but in-game it looks pretty nice, and I also added this little twitching. Now that I had a new enemy, I constructed a new level. Then one more. For this level I've also added these falling platforms, just to spice things up a little. At this point, the planned 4 normal levels were finished, and the only thing left was the boss level. I asked GPT what we're going to do with the boss fight, and it told me,
"Let's build the boss level, the climax of this mini-campaign."
On paper, the boss fight GPT wants to make sounds pretty fun, and the boss arena, to my understanding, should look like this. So let's finally take a look at the boss sprite. Okay. For some reason, GPT didn't want to work. I tried one more time, GPT generated this boss sprite, it looks pretty good, but now the real challenge begins. As far as I know, you can't make a boss fight without attack animations, and my man GPT is not really good at making animations. That's why I decided to try something I did before, but a little different. I separated the hand and sword from the main sprite and rotated them in the game engine to make animations. It worked pretty well, but the animations looked too robotic. I kinda thought just to let it slide, but suddenly I remembered how I watched a Blender tutorial on making FPS reload animation.
And let's also offset the rotations a bit. And then we get that kind of nice offset effect here, that the rotation comes after the motion.
I used a similar approach, but into this space, and gave my animation this nice little shake, which added some imperfection, you know. Then I started working on special moves like occasional ground slams sending out shockwaves. Made this little animation and asked GPT to generate earth spikes. I thought that shockwave would look really stupid, and having earth spikes emerge from the floor is the way to go. I was blessed with this sprite, spent half an hour deleting the background and tested if the code works. Then I wanted to add this ranged slash attack, and something crazy happened. ChatGPT generated an image with a transparent background. I thought surely it won't happen again, so I asked it to generate slash animation for boss attacks. Again, transparent background. Make a sprite for boss health bar. Again, transparent background. Generate a slash sprite for the player attacks. Transparent background. 4 hits and 0 misses. Almost. When asked for player health bar, I recognized the good old ChatGPT. I think there might have been an update that added transparency to GPT image generator, so now with the correct prompting you can actually get sprites with transparent backgrounds. But for now let's return to the game. I've added slash effects to boss attacks and range slash attacks. Boss starts using range slash attacks only in the 3rd phase. Actually, let me just quickly explain the boss phases. This boss has 3 phases. When he transitions to 2nd phase, he summons 2 sentries, and when boss transitions to 3rd phase, he starts using range slash attacks and gains shield aura. Now, gameplay-wise, the boss fight is finished, and I only have to make a boss arena and change health bar. But before that, I want to do something with player animations. I hope I don't have to explain why. Firstly, I added the most basic walking animation, when the sprite gets shortened by 1 pixel. Then I separated the sword from the main sprite and animated player attacks, the same way I did with the boss. Then I took this part of the UI element ChatGPT generated and used it as a player health bar and dash bar. That's how they look in the game. I've also added invincibility frames after getting hit. Then I made the boss level with this crazy opening cutscene. As you can see, I've added these torches and these things. GPT generated them and said that some light sources will improve the atmosphere. At this point the game was basically finished and it only needed a little polish and some basic things I forgot to add, like checkpoints, damage flash effect, simple loading screen and main menu. I used glitch shader to make interactions in the main menu more interesting and made this level selection menu where you can see if you've skipped any collectibles on the level. You actually don't have to find any of them, but if you collect all of them, you can be, I don't know, proud of yourself. And finally, I've added lighting. And finally, I've added lighting on the levels to have some RTX action going on. Now, at least visually, this game is well flavored. By the way, this little blood splash animation was also generated by ChatGPT. Then I used some lighting in gameplay as an indication that the player's charge attack is ready or that the boss transitioned to his 3rd phase. So, the game is finished. No. There's one important thing I haven't added yet. I'll just show some gameplay for you to figure it out. Yeah, there are no sounds. Game is muted. So I needed sound effects and music. For sound effects, I found this site that creates AI-generated sounds, but since you can download them, I recorded them through OBS and converted them to MP3s. I really did that. Felt kinda pathetic. Then I've hit the free limit, so I had to download remaining sounds from free libraries. As for the music, I asked GPT to write prompts for the Suno AI music generator. Some tracks ended up being pretty good, but overall they sound real generic. And they can't be used for commercial use unless you're subscribed. I mean, subscribe to their services. So I've added music, sounds, tested if everything works, and uploaded this game to itch.io. I honestly thought I would finish this project pretty fast, but it took much more time than I expected. I've definitely spent hours deleting backgrounds from all the sprites, also sometimes I had to do some color adjustments, but it's fair to say that if I tried to make all of the sprites by myself, it would take even more time. However, did the AI tools I use really do a great job? Honestly speaking, ChatGPT came up with the generic game idea, generic enemies, pretty generic boss fight, had this memory problem where it forgot more and more about the game. Of course, the image generator worked really well, and with correct prompts you can definitely get nice sprites, although sometimes it struggles with animations and tile sets. Music done by Suno AI had the most generic tracks I've heard in a while. Again, maybe if you go crazy mode with prompting you can get something decent, but I don't know, in the end it will still have this generic flavor. It's like Unreal Engine games, you know? The point I'm trying to make is that right now AI still needs some time before it can create something really cool. But even now it can be used to make games or to make this process faster. Actually, you can already find sites where people generate games using prompts. And it's obvious that as the time goes, AI tools will only become better and more developers will use them, which is kinda good for both indie developers and big companies. Anyway, if you want to play this game, the link is in the description, at least it was fun to make. And if you subscribe to watch and then if you watch then